Just mute him.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Want to welcome everybody to the meeting. I can see who's online. How about in the room?
13 people, 13 owners in the room.
Okay. Okay, well then, John, we'll go ahead and just have the roll call status quorum.
Yeah, let me ask Gary, did Greg Collins join as yet?
Yes,
Okay, so he is on.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, okay, well, very good. Thank you for that. So I can declare that a quorum is present with all 6 current board members either in the room or on the Zoom call. And also verify that the board was properly notified of the meeting, and also an agenda for the meeting was posted both in the lobby and on the website for anybody, all owners to be aware of it. So shall I move on to the minutes of the November meeting?
please.
Yeah, I would like to note that there is an error in what I distributed. It says the meeting in the minutes, it says the meeting started at 10, and that's not correct. The meeting started at 8:30. So otherwise, I'm not aware of any errors. So what I would like to do would be to move to approve the minutes as corrected.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as corrected.
Second.
We need a second.
Scott just seconded it.
Okay,
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is taken care of.
Thank you.
Okay. Is Andy there in the room?
And he's in the room.
Okay, okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody there. I understand you guys have had a lot of snow up there. We've had weather around the country. We've had it here today, or actually yesterday. First day we've been above 0 or above 32 since last Saturday. So it's been around. Texas got hit worse than what we did, though, as far as the ice. So that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, good thing for
That's
Oklahoma.
why we don't like you Okies.
Oh, I think we've got a good meeting today, some good information. I would like to let everybody know we will have 2 board openings later this year. And we have a presentation by John about a board candidate academy, and that'll be some good information. We'll go through there as well as a couple of other things. There is one thing I would like to say. In the letter that I sent out with the budget to all the owners, in trying to be more explanative or explain better where, we have an 8.3% increase. In trying to explain it a little more clear into where the increase was coming from, I made the comment saying that it was 9.3, which is of the base assessment. But if you take that, you use that 9.3 number, you're not comparing apples to apples. That's a figure that does not include everything. So I just want to kind of clear that up. In retrospect, I should not have put that in there. I think it's caused a little confusion. The increase is 8.3%. And so if you hear anybody around property or wherever using a 9.3 number, that's an apples to oranges number. It's not an accurate reflection of what the increase is. So just want to let everybody know, if you hear the 9.3, you know that that's not accurate. It's not accurate in that that is the amount that we're increasing total. So next thing, Elisa, have you heard of any more formal objections to the budget?
I have 4 as of this morning.
Okay. Okay, well then, having heard those and the ones that I'm previously aware of, then having an objection of 67% of the votes of the association under the governing documents, our budget is deemed ratified. So with that, the next thing I want to talk about, early December, Jerry Q2 notified me that he was considering putting his unit on the market. He did so, and then just after Christmas, he notified me saying he had a contract, would be closing the next day, therefore he was resigning his position on the board. And so, you know, I would like to thank Jerry for everything that he did for the association. I mean, there's a lot of things that he did that we will appreciate for a long time. And it's a big loss for the association for him, but we all wish him well. Him and his wife are moving to Washington State. So I want to thank him. I again want to thank the negotiating committee for our water contract, which included Jerry, Joe, Eric, Greg, Scott. You guys did a remarkable job there. So with that, we'll move into the next item, which would be an appointment to fill Jerry Q2's position. So we heard last time that we had the opportunity to fill a position. A lot of people felt that there should be an appointment from the people that ran. This last time, we had a situation where all 3 candidates that ran were very good candidates that would all be assets to the ownership. And it was kind of the feeling amongst the board that whichever combination of the 2 were elected, we were going to be in good shape. And this time we had 3 good candidates. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to recommend that Andy Laudermilk be nominated to the board or appointed to the board. If you can't hear me out there, I tend to speak softly, so do this. But I recommend that Andy be nominated to the board. Andy ran, he attended the academies. So Andy, the most important qualification is Andy has showed that he desires to serve. It was a very close election. So many members voted for Andy. While Andy did not win 2 out of 3, it was a very close count. So there are a significant amount of homeowners who voted for Andy and would like to see him serve on the board. Finally, I've played golf and tooled around with Andy a little bit last summer. Andy is a people person, and I think that he will be very beneficial to the owners of Tamaron because he's quite approachable, and I think he'll be just one more set of ears that people can talk to and express their interests one way or another. So with that, I recommend Andy wholeheartedly for the board.
Would you repeat? that?
Mr. President,
Yes,
hey, Mark, just put that in the form of a motion, please.
I will move that Andy Laudermilk be, do I have that right, Andy? I
Yeah,
think- And it's
well, and
Laudermilk, I don't think it's quite as bad. I move that Andy, for all the reasons I just spoke, be nominated to the board to serve the remainder of Jerry Q2's term.
I second that motion. And for just a little bit further discussion, I'd ask Andy to serve as the architectural review chairman, and he readily accepted that. And we haven't had any yet this year, but when we do, I look forward to working with him on that. Also, Andy's in the mortgage industry, which is some very good knowledge that we'll be able to use on the board going forward. So any other discussion? Okay, then we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it sounds, John, like it was 6-0. And Andy is now officially a member of the board. So welcome, Andy.
That means you gotta come sit up here.
Sit on your lap.
We can grab you a chair, but either way, just chime in accordingly if you want to.
Yeah. Okay, so
He's now.
going along with the appointment of Andy to fill Jerry's board position, Jerry was also a member of the board of ECWC, which is Elbert Creek Water Company. And Taco's representative in our negotiations, we had secured that we would have representation on their board and
Advisory board.
advisory board. And so that was another position that was left open for us to fill. And we found another candidate for that, a gentleman named Paul Brown. And John is acquainted with Mr. Brown and suggested him and then spoke to him. And he is a retired professor of biometeorology at the University of Arizona. And seeing his resume, it's very impressive. So John, I'll go ahead and throw it over to you.
yeah, I was muted. I've gotten to know Paul. He's lives in Pinecone, sort of near us, and so he and I visited. And when I found out his background, he essentially Paul was the University of Arizona's chief water consultant for many years, advising particularly farmers as well as municipalities and interestingly enough, golf course owners throughout the state of Arizona, because the U of A is in fact the ag school in that state. And of course, as a result of his whole life experience, his education in meteorology, soil science, et cetera, and his association with the university, he basically probably understands the Colorado River watershed better than certainly as well as anybody. So I just felt like with that kind of credential and that kind of experience, it would just be really a tremendous benefit to Taco to have somebody with his many years of experience in water management to sit on that board to represent us. And as Joe points out, it is advisory. It's not a governing board as such, but extremely important for Taco to have a representative on it. And also, obviously, the more knowledgeable that person is about water issues, the better for us. So I would make a motion to appoint Dr. Brown to that position.
Okay. Being it's not a position that we need to vote on for the board, I will go ahead and make that appointment with the intentions that the rest of the board agrees and that they would verbally agree and back up that appointment. Is there,
Well, I'm in favor.
what's that, John?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
Anyone opposed to it?
My only question is, all on the phone? Do we know
Is
that?
that the other Brown?
That's probably him.
All right, whoever is labeled Brown, could you just unmute and identify yourself, please?
And what- and-
Can you hear me? This is Paul Brown.
Okay,
All right.
Thank you.
So for anybody that doesn't know, just the advisory board was put in place after ECWC's existence came into being. And many of the communities, Tamaron being one, wanted some representation as to rate increases going forward primarily. And so we have a representative. The Glacier community behind the gate has a representative on it. The two Rockwood communities have a representative on it, and each of the three estates cliffs have a representative on it. So I believe there's like 6 or 7 members, and we have one. So it's a way for us. It's a way for users, customers of ECWC, to have their feelings heard on the goings on and potential rate increases. And Jerry he did a very good job on that. And he was one of the prime movers in getting that advisory board established and approved by ECWC management. So there's a little history there.
okay, so with that, we want to welcome Paul and thank him for his service to the community. So we'll go ahead and move along, and Joe, we'll go ahead and have a review of the financials.
Okay, Gary, do you want to put the 2022 financial report on the screen? Okay, so
Hang on 1 second.
I thought I saw you had it there.
And Joe,
So for clarity, while Gary's doing this, what we're discussing here is the year end.
Joe.
No, this is the budget I have.
Who's saying Joe?
It's John.
That's John.
I am, John. I just want to make sure, Joe, that I do get a copy of the presentation you're making.
Gary will email it to you.
Thank you.
So again,
Hang on.
what we're reporting on here in this portion of the meeting is the 2022 year-end financial reports that will be posted on the website following this meeting. This is not a discussion of the 2023 budget, which is on the agenda later. So I would like to ask that we not digress into 2023 budget questions. We just keep this as a 2022 year-end report. So we're looking at the balance sheet. First item of interest on the top half of the balance sheet is our reserves. Counts 103, 107, and 108 constitute our reserves that are in 3 different banks. The Bank of the San Juans account is a money market account. The Bank of First Internet Bank of Indiana and Stearns Bank are laddered CDs. The total in our reserves as of the end of 2022 was $862,012.79. Going down, another item that might stick out at you, raise a flag, is account 132, accounts receivable, $600,000. Sounds like a big number. It always is. on the last day, in the last month of a quarter. Because that, all of the that represents the first quarter 2023 assessments that have been billed. So that's a billed amount, and that number will come down by a third in each successive month as we move through the 4 individual quarters of the year. So that's a normal number that you see there. Coming down a little bit further into fixed assets, count 150. That's all of the common property and the units that we own, the value of those. Just under $1.2 million. The units that we own are 115, which is right here, part of this conference room, 114, and then 110 down the hall. Moving down into liabilities and equity. 240 deferred revenue. This again is it's a crossover number from the accounts receivable. It's 3 months of dues billed. I'm not sure why that's $10,000 difference than, why is there a $10,000 difference
I'm
there?
not sure.
Yeah, accounting anomaly, let's call it. Going down further, a number that might jump out at you and you wonder what it is account under equity 320, unrestricted fund beginning balance. What this is a sum of all prior years' net income and losses. And so that's $867,000. So that's an accumulative number over all of the years of the association. Another number that I'd like to point out, which I don't normally zero in on because it's always a positive number, is net income. So for 2022, we actually had a net income loss of $144,000. That's the highest loss that I've seen, which, and this gets into, it's revenues versus expenses. So we overspent revenues by $144,000 last year, and we all probably know why. Inflation and higher costs of doing business. As I said, this almost never happens. It did happen in 2020. That was the only other time in the last maybe 10 or 15 years that I can recall. And that happened at the tail end of a 5-year span when we had no increases in assessments. So we had to recover from that loss. And then I believe it was 2021. We had an increase in assessments at that time. Okay, I'll move on to, and I'll ask for questions at the end. I'll move on to the income statements. The first section is all of our income streams. Account 400 is the assessments billed to owners. If you scan down through there, you'll see that there's really no anomalies. Everything is pretty much pretty close to budget. And the bottom line is out of a little over $2 million in revenue, we're only off by about $1,000. So really good performance there on the revenue side. Going down to expenses, this section is administrative expenses. Insurance, we had an increase in our insurance that kicks in October. We do it on a calendar year basis. We do it we get the increase notification before the budget. So we had a little bit of, I think the insurance cost went up, what, 27% next year? Yeah. So pretty hefty increase there. Scanning down through a couple of items that I highlighted. Legal fees. We've always had a lot of activity on the legal side, and we've had some declining budget amounts in legal fees over the last several years. 17.5 was budgeted, but we only spent 12,806, so pretty good performance there. We will have a couple of contract negotiations coming up this next year as our TV, internet, and telephone contracts expire late this year and early next year. So we'll be engaging in some of that. So there'll be some legal activity on that. Scanning down through the annual meeting, the budget was exceeded there, mostly because of food and beverage costs, increases in food and beverage costs. I met with staff yesterday or earlier in the week, and we'll be looking at that to see how we can pare that down for the coming years. Don't see anything else really on there that's worthy of note. Again, $532,000 budgeted. Bottom line expenses, expenditures, 529, so a little bit under, so good performance there. Moving into operations. Building maintenance. We had a little bit higher expenses versus budget this year, 155,000 versus a budget of 140. Again, just higher costs of doing business in 2021 and 2022 versus years past. Snow removal. We busted that budget pretty good. 70,000 budgeted. We spent 114,000. We typically have budgeted for snow removal based on a 5-year average. That 5-year average has been going up. It's probably a combination of more snow and increased costs of doing the snow removal. I'll talk about 2023 just briefly here. We budgeted $85,000 on this year's budget for snow removal. You're all sitting down. We've already spent 122,000. And I wouldn't be surprised if by year end we spend $200,000. It's crazy. That's what it is. This was an incredibly heavy January. Greg put out an email and he sent it to the board. I'd like to suggest that memo goes out to everybody, so all the owners can kind of see that too. It's summarized. Huh?
Why don't we just have them summary?
Yeah, can we throw that up on the screen and then let Greg just speak to it a second?
I didn't get it.
You didn't get it?
No.
Well, you could just. I
Can
mean,
you
speak to it?
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but
I can grab it.
Here, yes, do you want me to read it?
yeah, go ahead and let Paige read it, then we'll talk about it.
We've received close to 80 inches of snowfall in about a 3-week period, which has led to massive efforts to snow removal from parking lots, sidewalks, decks, and roofs. The first 30 inches or so was extremely high moisture content. If it would have been colder, the snow would have been another 8 to 10 inches in overall depth. The high moisture content from the storm, followed by colder temps and another 2 weeks of heavy snowfall, have created many issues with ice, especially on the roofs and overall the property. Ice dams and roof leaks on the aging roofs have been especially bad this year, creating the need for extensive snow removal from many of the roofs around the property. This, coupled with snow removal from over 53,000 square feet of decks, stairs, and sidewalks, has been a huge undertaking. We have had an excess of 10,000 cubic yards of snow from these areas. The lodge was another challenge, as the really wet snow was a major factor in the huge ice dam problems, causing many roofs to leak in the lodge. We are currently dealing with the same ice dam issues in High Point, Gamble Oak, and Pinecone. The ice is extremely damaging for these roofs, and their age is starting to really show. Removal of the snow on the roofs is a dangerous and expensive undertaking. I know there have been some complaints about the snow removal as far as how it compared to last year or recent memories. These people have either not lived here full time or not owned here for very long. I have lived here full time for the past 7 years, full time, and I have photographic evidence of how it looked, how it was plowed, and how it was shoveled. It has never been that way, better now than it has never been better than it is now, especially considering the amount of snow we received and the amount of time in which we received it. Additionally, we have been asked to plow between 1 and 2 inches of snow depth. While this can be nice, it is not necessary and it adds to cost. We have also been asked to clean up on a will call basis whenever someone moves their car. We are happy to do this, but once again, it adds to the cost. This has never been done in the extent in the past, never been done to this extent in the past. Some people want the parking lots plowed down to the pavement after every snowfall. We can do this too, however. It runs up the cost and is very hard on the asphalt, stripping it of any seal coats and making the parking lot degrade quicker and or increasing the frequency of having to apply expensive seal coats to protect the parking lots. That's that.
It's probably also worth pointing out, one of the comments in there was having to come back and touch up after a car is moved. And Gary, you made a comment earlier that this has been the worst year of people moving their cars timely.
Yeah.
Which causes us a lot of problems, because if we can push the snow around, when they're doing the mass removal, it is a lot easier than going in there and doing one parking spot at a time.
Before this year, I mentioned that it's up there that 114,000 was spent in 2022. That's the second highest year that I can remember. The highest year previous to that, I believe, was maybe it was 2019, and that was 136,000. And of course, we're going to break that this year. We already know that. So Greg's team their efforts have been Herculean on this, and that's reflective of the cost as well. Plus, we had to, in a couple of weeks ago, we engaged a third party to do the roof clearings to get some of the ice dams off the roofs.
Cleared the whole lodge. That was a massive.
Yeah.
Massive amount of snow.
Skiers are happy.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Grounds 624. This is under budget by a significant amount, but that's offset by, on the capital side, when we get over there, you'll see that a lot of effort was expended in High Point this year, doing grounds upgrades up there. So these two, this account and that account, tended to offset each other. 637, 638, 639, and 641 are the exterior maintenance accounts. As you all know, we spent about $8 million over the course of around 10 years upgrading the exteriors of all of the buildings, the lodge, and all 3 outlying areas. And they all look great compared to what they did 10 or 12 years ago. Maybe a little more than that now, time flies. But the point here is that we underspent in all of these exterior maintenance activities this year, which are intended to keep these areas there, to keep the wood, to keep it fresh, to keep it stained, keep it from fading, keep it from cracking, so that we don't have to go through that overhaul that we did again for a long time. So spending this around $90,000 a year on keeping these buildings fresh, keeping the finishes on them fresh, is an effort to maintain those and extend the life of them. We didn't spend enough this year. I've spoken to Greg and his crew and Bobby about this, and this was basically an inability to get it done between May and December, when they came on board in December. But we're assured that the attention is going to be paid to these areas in the future. As you can see, we underspent in all of those accounts this year. So we'll fix that in 2023.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'd get a lot earlier start on it this year. We were halfway through the summer before we ever really knew what was going on here.
Right.
Just being able to take over in May, plus
Understood.
we had a lot of rain this summer too, which hampered our ability to do a lot of these things. So.
Okay, Let's go to capital, Gary. Or wait a minute, did I skip a page?
Operating.
Oh, yeah, never mind, sorry. So let's see, communication systems maintenance, it's a small uptick from the budget. That was purchases of parts, supplies, to keep these systems going. Let's see, fogged windows, we spent a little more than the budget. That seems to be an increasing demand thing year to year to year. But again, if you scan all the way down, it looks like the cost to budget is fairly good. Now we'll get into some of the areas where we did go over budget quite a bit. As you know, in this count 600, this was our personnel expenses. And we started the year 2022 with a full staff of maintenance. That all changed when our general manager resigned, and then the entire staff resigned in the spring of last year. And so we were kind of left in a lurch, and Greg and his team stepped forward and said, we can provide these services for you. So we put them on a kind of a trial, see how it goes thing for the balance of 2022. And they're still with us. It ended up that their the cost to do the work caused us to exceed this budget when you combine that with the staff that we had left, and in combination with their crews. But I think everybody can recognize as well that we're getting better service now, more timely service, and the property is getting taken care of the way it should be.
Hey, Joe,
Yeah,
I just wanted to mention also, we did try to hire people. We ran ads, at the salary we were advertising, the best candidate we got was an automotive mechanic for our maintenance manager position. It's felt we would have had to, at the very least, go up to 100,000 to attract anybody, which would have been a significant increase to that position. Also, since then, we've been trying to hire a night and weekend person. The people that we had on staff were making between 14, 15 an hour. At $18 an hour for this position, we're not even getting responses. So costs are just going way up for personnel when you can get them. I've spoken to Zig, who is the greenskeeper there at Glacier, and he said they advertise $22 an hour and do not get responses for their open positions.
yeah, they have the same problem we do. We're 20 miles north of town. So getting people to work here, and 40+ mile round trip to work with gas prices the way they are, that really cuts into somebody's cost of getting to work. So they want more money if they're going to come up here, and that's.
And Joe, I just echo what Rick said. I just, on the ground side of things, to get temporary summer help this past year, I personally made numerous trips up to the college, talking both in the geology department and the biology department, kept coming back to Lisa to get $2 increases in offers. And I think we got up to $18 an hour, and I never got one student to say they would be willing to come up to Tamaron and work.
Bottom line is getting and keeping quality people working here. It's getting more costly.
It's hard to find people.
It's hard to find people.
Period.
So anyway, we broke that budget by about $80,000 in the combination of the BHP guys and our own staff, which we have what, two two
Three.
permanent staff, three, yeah, okay.
Plus the front desk. but
Well, the
just in
front desk is
maintenance, yeah.
different, but yeah, okay. So going down to utilities, water and sewer, we exceeded that budget by 24,000. That was predominantly due to irrigation water costs. One of the things that we asked the BHP guys to take a good hard look at last summer was our watering. We know that the watering was, for whatever reason, the zones, the water pressures, whatever it was, we weren't getting good watering, probably not using enough water. So those improvements, the work that they did was reflected in the costs of irrigation over June, July, August, September. We had pretty good bumps in the cost, and that caused us to go over budget there. 720 electricity, I just make a comment on this. That's such a moving target. We've been over budget, under budget, swinging like a sine wave over the last 10 years, never been able to really get it close. And we came as close as I've ever seen it this year, 154,000 spent on a $150,000 budget. So pretty good there. I don't know what that'll do next year. We'll see. It could go back to the old ways again, but like I said, it just never seems to be easy to, and it's all dependent on Mother Nature too. I mean, in Colorado, this was one of the coldest Januaries on record, 10 degrees average under low temperatures, 10 degrees lower than the lowest lows. It was all, and I heard this on the Denver news station. Also, it was one of the we know it's one of the snowiest Januaries.
Yeah.
14 days with measurable snowfall.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yes,
so
sir.
half the days of the month. So the rest of that is nothing, no big issues there. If you look at look down at total expense, budget and 700, total 700. I mean, I'm sorry, total expense. $2,329,000 budget, $2,436,000 spend. So that's right there is basically where we've seen the biggest increases. The cost to maintain the property, the labor to maintain the property, the water and sewer, and the insurance, that totals up to about $114,000 in overspending, which is pretty close to the number I showed you on the balance sheet that I pointed out. So. Okay, now we can move to capital. Now we allocate under income up there, we allocate a portion of the assessment fees to the capital budget. Last year was 404,000. Bat mitigation, we overspent there. Fire suppression, that pump, the fire suppression pump 826, I believe that's up in High Point. That project was deferred to 2023, so we will be doing it there. And Bobby, you mentioned we might even have a second pump that's a problem.
Up in High Point?
In High, well, somewhere.
Yeah.
Is it two of them up there now
Yep.
that are a problem?
Yep.
One of them that froze up or seized up.
Yep.
So we might, if we fix both of those, we'll probably overspend the amount that we budgeted for 2023 on that. So we'll see how that plays out. 833, the lodge plumbing replacement project, as was reported previously, you all know that that project was canceled. And we're dealing with the drain vent waste pipes on an as you go basis instead of going in and wholesale spending. I believe it was going to be what? It was a lot of money over a lot of years. So, yeah, so we decided to do that differently. 835, there's the number I was talking about on the ground, on the operating side where we underspent. We made that up by overspending on the High Point landscape upgrade project. spending 24 against a budget of 17. 836, it was decided at some point last year, get away from the rotating resealing parking lots on a 4-year basis and just do crack fills. Realized that wasn't a good idea. And instead of waiting, we just went ahead and went back into that program this year and did the reseal in Pine Cone. I believe we're going to do the lodge next year. Isn't that right, Bobby?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we're back on a, you know, in my mind, there's 2 areas that we really need to maintain and not let fall into disrepair. And that's the exteriors of these buildings and also the parking lots. These parking lots are like 40 plus years old, and keeping them keeping them maintained by resealing them is going to save us from having to spend a lot of money somewhere down the road on complete repaving, which will, if you think the roofs are hurting, that hurts you, that'll be spending a lot of money. Unplanned capital expenses, we always budget 25,000 for that. We only spent 13,000 this year. Every other year that I can remember, we've always overspent that because you don't know what you don't know and things come up, and that's what that's for. This was the heat trace project under the buildings to bring the heat tapes that keep our drain plumbing from freezing underneath the buildings in Pine Cone and Gamble Oak, keep those up, keep those from failing, and get them up to code. So with the bottom line is parking lots cost us more money, the fire mitigation cost us more. I didn't mention that, the defensible space up there, 837. It's at the top of the page now. We budgeted 10,000, but we recognized that we really needed to do some fire mitigation close to the buildings. So a lot of the old Gamble Oaks were cleared and thinned, and did a lot of work there to help protect us from fire during fire seasons when it comes. So again, the parking lots, 38,000 up, fire mitigation, 27,000, the bat mitigation, the landscaping. So that all ends up with a fairly good excess on this capital side, mostly because we dropped the plumbing, the drain vent waste plumbing replacement project. Okay, so we go to the permanent reserves page. This is just a summary of the beginning and ending balances in our permanent reserves, how we contribute to them, interest income, rental revenue from the 2 units that we own and rent on a long-term basis, and also the 442, the capital contributions from sales, which is a new program we put in place last year that where new owners are assessed an amount equal to 2 months dues. 2 months or 2 quarters?
2 months.
2 months.
And we've already gotten to half of that in January.
Is that right?
Half of it. We're only 3,500 for January.
So just ways to build our reserves. Bottom line is our net budget was to have $850,000 in reserves at the end of 2022. We ended up with 861. So we did better building our reserves this year than planned, which is good. And the last page is the service and security desk, what people still call the front desk. Revenues ran behind budget, mostly because of lower rental occupancy. I wanted to find that email you had sent out a few weeks back with the occupancy rates. We hit a peak in 2021, But then 2022 came back down to what it
Back
was
down, yeah.
in 2020, in 2020.
No,
So-
2020 and 2021 were high. 2022 went back down to like 2019.
Right, so, yeah, so we had the COVID drop rise, and then now we're back to normal, so. So a little bit lower rental occupancy than we had been, what we thought we might get. So there was a little deficit there. Total expenses are a little bit higher, a few $1,000s higher than budget. Bottom line with carryover, we had a little bit of a loss in that in running this service and security desk. So that is it. Any questions for anybody on anything? Okay, Gus.
Joe, just generally speaking, on all that reserve money, what are we?
On all what money? Reserves?
On the reserve. What are we generating from those banks right now?
Well, it's getting better because, as you know, interest rates have gone up. Some of our laddered CDs are down in the 0.5% to 1% range. Now they're renewing at, what is it now, about 3.5%? Yeah. So we had a trend where we were getting probably, net between 2.5% and 3% on the CDs. What we get on the money market account at the Bank of the San Juan is not much. But what we were getting on the net when we first started the laddered CD program several years ago, we were getting maybe 2.5% to 3%. That dropped down below 1% when inflation was so low for a few years. Now that it's peaking back up again, we're getting again, these are laddered, so they renew every 2 years. So as we get older ones with maybe a 1% rate, we're renewing those at 3.5 or more. So that's the range. Yeah. It's not great, but it's low risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's
I
that?
saw a question back there. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Yeah, Bob Rubin,
Okay.
on the fixed asset side, line 150.
150.
Is
Yes,
that at cost basis or fair market value?
Elisa. I have to ask her.
I believe it's cost basis.
It's probably cost
Those numbers
basis.
have been the same for years.
Yeah, I don't think that's changed, so I don't think we adjust that for market
Okay,
value.
okay.
Ron,
Ron Hyman, question on count 836. The title indicates Crackville, High Point, Gamble Oak and Lodge. Did you then also indicate that includes the Pine Cone Seal Coat?
well, this year's money was the Pine Cone Seal Coat, the 48,000 you see there. That was the crack filling and seal coating of the Pine Cone lot. Next year, it'll be the lodge.
And then there was cracked filling at the lodge.
And we did
A
do
small
crack filling
portion.
at the lodge this year.
The second question, in account 441. Unit rental revenue. We have 2 units that are rented out, is that correct?
Yes, 110 and 114.
Would it be a correct statement to say that we do not charge ourselves annual assessments?
That's
On
correct.
those units?
That's correct.
Should we not be showing somewhere in the books that loss of what, $15,000-$16,000 between those 2 units?
I don't know where we'd show it. I mean,
Well, I don't know either. I'm not an accountant, but it seems to me if those units were owned privately, we would be taking in $7,000 or $8,000 annually.
true enough.
And we're only getting 15 and we're losing 15. Why keep them?
Some people believe we should sell them.
We have employees in one of them.
One of them has an employee in it that if we didn't have that lodging for that employee, he happens to be the graveyard shift guy at the front desk. He wouldn't work here anymore.
Would there not be other long-term rentals available, privately owned?
Not
Perhaps.
Yeah, I mean,
It would be
it's-
double the price.
He gets a favorable rent, to be quite candid.
It's something we've talked about every year. Does it make sense to?
Could we
look at
approach
that?
our accountant and ask them how we should be showing that loss of potential revenue?
take a look at that.
Yeah.
We'll check into it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions?
Okay, well, then we'll go ahead and move to the property report page.
There's a-
Oh, was there, I'm sorry, Gary said there might have been a chat question. Hold on.
Okay,
As a new owner, the issues of snow removal make a lot of sense. What strategies are employed by Taco to manage and review the issues discussed?
I'll defer that question to the board.
Not sure I follow what the question is.
Well, I mean, if I read the question right, there are some things we can do to manage the cost a little better, like Greg suggests. Let's not plow the lots when it's only an inch or two of snow. And let's be more efficient with plowing after cars are moved and things like that. So
Yeah, to the point I made earlier, we started, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, trying to register license plates. When the snow comes, it comes. And our only means of notifying owners or renters is really just owners, is emailing them. There have been instances where we don't know whose car is, a particular car, who the owner is. It would help to know that. And so to the extent, you haven't registered your license plate with the front desk, help us with that, because then we can at least try to pick up the phone and call you. That's, certainly doesn't help matters. And then, the other thing I'd add to it is it's snow. I mean, it's like rain. There's no way we know what's coming. And year over year, I think you said, you look at that 5 years on average. We've had years which been low, and we've had years like we got 80 inches in 2 weeks, right? Yeah, so it's not easy to manage.
Almost as much snow in January as we've had, any of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
After 2019.
Yeah, it's unfortunately a budget item that is very reactionary. You can't plan for, some of the expenses associated with it.
yeah, I mean, if we look, the 5-year average, when we did the budget in 2022, the highest year was 2019, 132,000. The lowest year was 2018. Also the year we had the fire.
Yeah.
Was 37,000. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
hardly ever
you
got
just
flat,
never
yeah,
know.
yeah.
You just never know.
And, the other thing is, there's a lot more people here now than there was in 2019, even when there was a lot of snow. I mean, you weren't having to
That's a fair
keep
point.
as many people happy and work around as many cars and all these things.
It's a very fair point.
2021 and 2020 were both around 60, little over 60,000. So we were under budget both of those years. The 5-year average, 81.5, and we budgeted 85 this year. And we already know that's gone.
Yeah.
So next year's 2024's budget will be significantly higher. And then watch, we'll have a low snow year. and it'll be-
Snow year.
Yeah, you just never know. You can't, it's so hard to predict. It's impossible to predict.
And Joe, I gotta tell you, I sent out an email asking people to move cars. I've been doing this for 10 years. It's frustrating. Number one, when people don't move cars when we send out the request, but also it's not a surprise that you're gonna have to move cars. It frustrates all of us when people don't automatically look out the window, they see a bunch of snow and say, I gotta move my car. People have to be aware of that, especially people who are living here full time. You can't do anything about guests, but people should know by now, I gotta go out and move my car. Because otherwise, as Bobby said, they spend 3, 4, 5 days afterwards cleaning up after individual cars. That costs a lot of money.
It's a pain, but I mean, I can tell you, I do it. I look out the window and I watch for the snow plows. And
Sure.
as soon as I see them coming, I'll move. They generally plow the north part of Pinecone first. As soon as you guys are done up there, I move my car up there, so my.
And that helps.
It
you know,
does, it helps a lot.
Both pieces of equipment are there and we can kind of tag team it, but when we go to High Point, we drive it all up there and then we got to go back down to Gamble because people moved. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes time.
That's all, and it's moving that equipment that far is,
Yeah.
it's time consuming and.
You know, Joe, but also what's not, what's not snow dependent that we could probably plan for a little bit more, and it's gonna mean more dollars, is what labor has costed over to man the equipment over the past 10 years. But then the price of diesel over the past 10 years. 10 years ago, what was a gallon of diesel?
Oh,
About
man.
$1.25.
Yeah. Mhm.
And now we're paying $5. So, and you know, those two items that we cannot, we could plan for, but we can't control, also increase the cost over the years.
Yes, sir.
Ron?
It would occur to me, what your discussion is, that one of the things that's driving a high cost of snow removal is our lack of cooperation or foresight. We
You
have,
said it better.
we have rules and regs. We have fines for many things. Why don't we create a rule or a reg that requires us to cooperate and move our vehicles or face a fine that will then be put toward the snow removal? I mean, if I get fined $200, I guarantee you, next time it snows, I'm gonna be down there in my skivvies moving the car.
That's certainly a
Or the
consideration.
$200 will pay for the guy who's having the snow shovel.
Keep in mind, we don't always
That's
know whose car it is. That's part of the
Well,
issue.
then why don't we issue parking permits at the front desk that go in the windshield for everyone, including guests?
We have owners that don't cooperate with that.
I understand. That's why I
Yeah.
suggest rules and regs and fines.
Certainly a consideration.
Enforcement's always a problem.
Yeah.
What, the next question?
There's a question in the audience too.
Wasn't there two questions up on the, what was the other chat
There's
question?
gonna be a third one here too.
And what was the second one?
The second one, general review question. How do board members feel they are doing to manage the annual expenses and where can we do better?
Well, that's a pretty broad question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, board.
You know, I should be letting Rick answer this. but
Yeah,
since-
well, you know, until we hit 12% inflation, you know, I felt like the board has done a pretty good job, and historically, the board has always done a good job. For a lot of the newer people that don't know, when Joe first came onto the board, Tamron HOA was for all practical purposes bankrupt. And then over the last, whatever, up to 15 years, you know, we have controlled expenses. And when I say we, I mean us and all the boards before us. We've controlled expenses to where now we have $860,000 in the bank. And for the most part, you know, this year being an exception, we had two things that happened this year no board has ever faced before. One, our entire maintenance staff left. They were all hired at much lower rates. To replace them was going to take more. And 12% inflation. You know, currently it's still, the last number put out by the administration is 10.2% for the month of December. So we're still facing record inflation we haven't seen for over 40 years.
If anybody saw the jobs report this morning, it was through the roof, the number of jobs that were created. So you can expect interest rates to continue to go up. This is a hard economy to manage. I mean, even the experts can't figure out why things are working the way they're working. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, we have a base of history that we use when we budget, and you know, there are anomalies to that. This year was certainly an anomaly. We can't control a lot of this. There's nobody in this room, nobody on the phone, and no owner out there that isn't dealing with the same thing at home. I got an electric bill this past year for a place I have up in Wisconsin. It's my dad's place. It was twice as high as it was last December. With no different usage, actually less usage. So, I mean, there are things that are a little bit out of our control.
I'd only change one thing you said, Rick. When I came on in the early 2000s, I don't think we were bankrupt, but we were definitely operating hand to mouth. And we had zero reserves. Yeah.
And Joe, to your point and the answer to the specific question, it is very broad. And I think we have some speakers later on that are going to go to that point. And so don't leave.
Another question.
What's the other one?
We used to, this is from 40142. We used to hire townspeople to shovel. Gary ran that. That's not exactly true. Now we pay BHP and they have been subletting for that. Aren't we double billed in those cases? Also, many fire extinguishers are past the 12-year mark and will need replacing. May not have been serviced this year.
Well, as to the first part of that question, before BHP, we did use townspeople. It was a outfit called Connections, which is a temporary labor agency in town. And yes, we used them for hand shoveling. And then BHP, aren't we double billed? I don't know. No, we're not double
Greg
billed.
could answer.
Huh?
Greg could speak.
Yeah, I
to
mean,
that.
Greg, we're using Greg's crews now for the hand shoveling. And I don't know if the hourly rates are comparable or not, but you can comment on that.
Yeah, well, and we use a temp service also to bring extra guys in
Yeah,
and gals when we have these mass quantities of snow because everybody wants their decks shoveled off.
Good.
And so, but I mean,
If I could, it's just
One thing you
something
need to
that
know.
everybody here can buy a snow shovel, right? Instead of calling and bitching. I'm sorry to be
I
frank,
shovel,
but
I shovel my own deck in my walk all the time. But as far as, I just lost my train of thought. One thing you need to know about BHP, our contract with BHP is not a fixed price contract or we pay them so much a month. It's all hourly. Everything is hourly. We pay for what we get. So there's no double billing. I mean, if they bring guys up from town to augment their guys, we're just paying more guys an hourly rate.
right,
We're not doubling up.
no,
Yeah.
not at all.
I think because they see a separate line of snow removal, that's where the confusion may be.
Well, the reason we keep snow removal on a separate line is because it's so damn crazy and we want to be able to keep track of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And one other thing, there are people who, when we have 18, 20 inches of snow, they want their deck shoveled. We can't do
Swept off.
that. What we need to do is shovel the sidewalks, stairs, and then access to the units.
Yeah.
We can't be spending time and money, a lot of money, shoveling off entire decks. If people want their entire deck shoveled off, well, I'll be a little more politic. Buy a shovel and shovel it. We just can't spend time and money shoveling off entire decks.
You get fresh air and exercise.
And again, and I'll repeat what something that I wrote in an email. We need to know which units are occupied and which units are vacant. Because spending time shoveling sidewalks and stairs and access to units that are just vacant because an owner wants to be permanently on the in-house list, that is another waste of money. We've got to stop doing that.
Well, and by the time we cleared everything from all this snow, the numbers are there. We moved over 10,000 cubic yards of snow by hand. That's another way to look at that. That's 833 12-yard dump trucks. It's a lot of snow to shovel.
They also shoveled 53,000 square feet of decks, sidewalks and stairs. That's a football field every time it snows. So
Good comparison.
every time it snows, they're moving a football field of 10,000 cubic feet.
And for the guys that we have shoveling, this last 3 weeks was frustrating for them because we'd just get everything cleared and then it'd snow again and they'd start all over. So we don't have people lined up waiting to want to go shovel. I mean, it's
It's
not
hard.
fun.
And by the way,
It's hard.
I've seen Gary and Paige out there shoveling snow. And one of your guys, Ryan.
Yeah.
He had his kids up here shoveling snow.
Mhm. It is. Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and move
I want
on.
to respond to the question on the fire extinguishers. And then we'll get to the ones here in the room. On the fire extinguishers, we're inspected by the fire department every year. And those fire extinguishers are all inspected, tagged and everything by the fire department. So if any of them are out of date, that's probably something we should follow up on.
It's been addressed.
Yeah, okay. Who had questions on here?
Snow removal, how are we billed for that?
On an hourly basis and equipment time.
What's our basis? What's the cost?
Depends on what the guy is being paid.
Anywhere from 20 or 17 to
The guy driving the plow or the skid steer is getting more money than the guy hand shoveling.
Really.
What's the range? 17 to,
17 to 28 bucks an hour.
yeah,
You know,
and then plus there's equipment time, which covers the cost and the fuel and the wear and tear on the equipment, and that runs right around what, $200 an hour?
equipment time is charged by an operator and the equipment's, it's about 200 bucks an hour.
So that's the operator is included in
It's
that.
Correct.
included.
Okay. In the back,
Garrett Quinn, 784. About the snow removal, is the shoveling and the plowing on the same budget? Or
Yes.
are they separate?
yes, it's all included in that account 616.
Okay,
When we track it, I mean, we have a spreadsheet behind that shows how much every week. How much we spent on hourly hand shoveling and how much we spent on plowing.
right. Okay, I understand that.
If I can make a recommendation, are we done with snow? I think we've covered the snow pretty well here.
Well, I'm not finished.
Okay, go ahead.
With the snow removal, you were mentioning that if it's less than an inch, that you're not gonna plow. But when you do that and let it sit, it turns to ice very quickly, and now you have an ice problem.
I don't think that's what was
Better
said.
to-
I think we're being asked to plow when it's 1 to 2 inches, which we're suggesting that is adding cost. And perhaps we could minimize that a
It will
bit.
add cost, but it will, in the long run, be cheaper because you won't have to have the ice problem. Once it gets ice, the plows go right over top of it. They can't scrape up the ice because it damages the road. And also with the stairs, they were a little bit lax. Well, I wouldn't say lax, but I had to ask to get my stairs shoveled a couple times because they left a foot of snow on the stairs and you're climbing up and down there, literally sliding up and down the stairs, which is a safety hazard. So part of the budget is to clean the stairs, and that's why I think the stairs are actually a bigger safety issue than the parking lot. I'm not talking about the decks, I'm talking about the walkways and the stairs.
Yeah.
I thought maybe if it was a separate part of the budget, if it could be resolved a little better. I understand that when they had the big snow, the guys couldn't make it up from town, and that's why they didn't shovel. But that's part of the job, and everyone who lives here knows that.
If they can't get up here, they can't get up here. I mean, that's part of the challenge we have across the board, being up at this altitude 20 miles from town. So, I mean, as I said, I think we beat up the snow pretty well. I understand your concerns. They're doing their best to clear the snow as quickly as they can. We don't always know when, if people are in units or not in units, they're trying to address it as quickly as we can. Everything you mentioned, believe me, it's intended to get done, but there's only so much money in the budget. So every time, we're doing this, we're adding costs.
You gotta factor into, this was the worst single month that I can remember.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to go back a lot of years to find one that was even comparable.
But to Scott's point, this is a pinch point. There's only so many people and there's a lot of snow. So it's imperative, as Gary said, is let Gary know who is here, who is not, so that the limited amount of people can prioritize their work.
So I'm sure everybody is aware how this process works, but shoveling lists we get from Gary. There's a priority list and there's an in-house list. If we have 15 guys show up to shovel, they get divided up into all 4 areas, including the lodge. Each area has a priority list, which will be in red. Those are either elderly or people that need to be shoveled out right away. The in-house, then we go to the in-house list, which are people that are here. If we miss your steps, I don't know if you're on the list or on a priority list, I don't know, but when we have 15 inches of snow, it takes longer to shovel out the ones that we start with, and then we go down the list. So it took a while to shovel it all out. So
And again, I repeat, I mean, to the extent you can, do this yourself, if you're healthy enough to do it and you're willing to do it, get some of the, ice salt, get us a shovel, help.
Ice melts all over the property. You can, you can help yourself to all the ice melt you want.
I can't tell you how many times I've shoveled my deck.
Me too, me too.
And we've got some of those owners, you're doing it right away because they're on the priority list, you do them first.
Yeah.
And then it snows another
Then
couple
some more.
inches on top and they think,
they call in again.
why didn't you come shovel me?
See,
I would like to compliment this maintenance crew. They shoveled, 6 of them were shoveling the back deck. I think yesterday or the day before. I never saw people work so hard.
Well, thank you.
It was backbreaking because a lot of it was ice and they had to pound it and break it up, fall it off the roof. And my heart went out to these guys because it was a tough job. And I think that, and Bobby the other day was driving the backhoe all around the parking lot. And these guys work really hard. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
sure
that.
they appreciate that.
Okay, that is a perfect way to move to the next topic.
Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah, we need to move it on. Yep.
Rick, it's all your show. See, he got so bored, he's out wandering around getting coffee.
He's muted. You're muted, Rick.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the property report. Okay,
Well, I'm not gonna repeat anything that was said, so we won't talk about snow. All right, so. Well, we have been spending several days in a total of 13 units repairing leaks due to large amounts of snow and ice dams that built up on the lodge roof. We in drywall that was damaged by the ice dams and snow from these. We've been repairing drywall damaged by the ice dams and snow from these snowstorms as well. We are replacing failed cast iron weekly in units. The team has been updating heaters and riser closets to maintain the integrity of water lines. Last week, we spoke with Brooke from Blooming Landscape to prepare for the spring, to be sure that we're on top of that. And finally, the team is responding to work orders in an efficient manner. We're currently completing bigger jobs within 24 hours and smaller jobs within just a few hours. So that's all I have, considering that we spoke quite a lot with
the rest of
about snow. Do you guys have anything that you want to add?
No, we just want everybody to know we appreciate the opportunity and we're doing the best we can for everybody.
You're doing a great job.
And we strive to do better all the time, so we're trying to figure out better ways to handle everything, so.
okay, thank you. Okay, then, do you guys want to take a break or you guys want to keep going?
I think we're good to keep going, unless anybody else.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and go to John for the Board Candidate Academy.
Okay, thanks, Rick. As most of you know, last summer, actually, we conducted the first ever Taco Board Candidate Academy. And we had several participants. The original intention was to hold this academy prior to candidates making a decision on whether to to run for the board. Unfortunately, things got delayed and it got pushed over to the summer, but this year, the second iteration of this academy is going to be done in March and April timeframe so that, oh, and by the way, it essentially is 4 weekly meetings of indeterminate length, but essentially perhaps an hour, and then in any, if there's extra discussion. And we always offer them on Zoom, so it doesn't require an in-person attendance. So if an owner is interested in finding out more about what being a board member would entail, then the Board Candidate Academy would probably be a pretty good experience. And by the way, there is there's, as I said, it's essentially 4 sessions done in the evening, and several current and past board members have been very helpful in putting the information together. So there's a little written intro to each unit, so to speak. And then of course, questions, answers, again, these current and former board members have been very good about being willing to make short presentations to anybody who's interested in attending. So I would just say, look for this. And if you are contemplating possibly wanting to run for the board, you might want to take advantage of this opportunity.
Any questions from anybody? Okay. Then we will go ahead and we'll move on to unfinished business, which would be the contractor policy. And we've been requested to make some changes to our contractor policy. We've had some incidents that have occurred on property that we feel make this necessary. And these changes are being suggested just to protect ourselves. Okay, the first one would be under item number 6. And we would change it to read, contractors and/or owners are strictly prohibited from tampering with, disconnecting, disabling, or modifying any part of the telecom information system, which would include television, telephone, internet, energy management, smoke alarms. Any work on this system must be done only by personnel designated by the maintenance department. All portions of this system, including unit phones, must be functioning properly when remodel work is completed. The reason for this one is we have found where either, I believe one was an owner and one was a contractor, came in, and one of them just sheetrocked over a phone jack. And then another one where someone disconnected the energy management system in their unit. And what it did was it disconnected everyone in that building down behind him. So the reason we want to do that is protection of our property. Okay, the next one is under item 18. Any loft being added to a unit during remodel must meet La Plata County Code or building code for living space. The unit owner and/or contractor is responsible for obtaining stamped engineering drawings for such an addition, a copy of which must accompany submission of this scope of work or before any construction begins. Proof of final inspection approved by La Plata County must be submitted to the maintenance department upon completion of the project. The reason for this one, we had a owner who was adding a loft, and to make it meet code for stairs to go up to the loft was gonna be, yes, a certain expense. And what we believe is the contractor suggested we can get around that by just saying it's gonna be storage space. And put basically just a ladder up to the loft. If that's what the owner was gonna do, that's fine, and just use it for storage. But that owner then subsequently put that unit in the rental pool and advertised that loft space as an additional sleeping area. And how that's gonna affect us is, you know, in today's litigious society, somebody falls, they're not gonna sue just that owner. They're gonna try and hit Tamaron too, saying that we approved that unit, which was not the case. So then, excuse me, going into number 19, contractors or owners are strictly prohibited from tampering with or modifying fire suppression system in any unit or building. All work on the fire suppression system must be performed only by a licensed company designated by the maintenance department. Any violation of this rule will result in an immediate fine of $1,000 and the temporary suspension of the remodel project till the system is restored to proper working condition by TACO designated personnel. Any contractor in violation of this rule will be immediately and permanently banned from doing work on Tamaron property. So that one's pretty self-explanatory. You cut off the fire suppression system, that's not gonna be a good thing. So anyway, I would make a motion that the board go ahead and adopt these changes to the contractor policy
Now it is.
as designated.
Notice.
Scott.
Rick, Dan has a question.
Okay,
As far as the sprinkler systems, having those agencies work on it that are licensed by the state is most absolutely accurate. My question is why does it say then approved by the maintenance department? They only need to be licensed by the state of Colorado. Of course, have no issues with the fire department. The fire department will know that. But what is the issue with having that approved by the maintenance department? How's the maintenance department going to keep up on who's licensed and who's not?
You guys want to speak to that at all?
I think the approval part of the maintenance department, the only thing we really request is some drawings. If the fire suppression system has changed. And and that the fire sprinkler company has signed off on it.
Okay, but isn't the fire department approving that?
Not always,
Not always.
no.
So you're telling me the fire department is not coming up and inspecting those sprinkler systems and approving those plans?
Not that I'm aware of, and we have contracted with Lee and Lori Large over the years.
Correct.
And now, Jason?
Yeah.
Is it Jason, who is taking over their business, that's who we deal with. The reason we put in that it has to be approved by the maintenance department is because we want to know. And we want a history with the people who are going to be doing it. And those are the only two contractors that we deal with. We don't want somebody, well, I shouldn't speak for the maintenance department, but I don't think we want somebody coming in. I don't think we want a contractor who doesn't have a history here getting in touch with and bringing on another contractor to inspect this stuff who doesn't have a history here. We want the people who are working on these things in particular to know the entire system.
And are you? I mean, obviously, if there's a requirement for the city fire department to do these inspections or anything like that, and I don't know the answer to this. We can embed that in contractors' requirements. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that's what I'm suggesting. I'm making sure that that's there because clearly Lee and Lori Large are great. But also I want to make sure that our TACO is not putting themselves in the position of saying, this is the only contractor that can work on it. If there's another contractor in town who's licensed and also working. I don't know that the board has the businesses tell me as an owner, for example, that I have to use Lee and Lori Large when there's another licensed contractor in town or coming out of Farmington, which has happened for 25 years, working on sprinkler systems and doing it effectively.
So is the language that you're recommending that it is a licensed contractor?
Well, I think
You
they
said
already
that.
say that. It just says approved, you know, and maybe in concert with the maintenance department to something to the extent.
I think
Just
it-
something, so, and I understand, Bobby, what you're saying, you want to know what's going on, but unless something's changed in the fire department, they normally always have to put eyes on it before the system's done, especially when you're moving walls.
Has it been a problem having, I don't, Large, Lee and Lori Large, whatever you said it was called, getting them to do this? I mean, is there a shortage of people to do this and that we need to have others coming from Farmington or elsewhere?
Yeah,
Well-
he's inundated, although he's getting to the point to retire. You know, it's like anything else. It's hard to find good help.
Well, this Jason is taking over Lee and Lori's deal is he does a lot of maintenance work on all the systems around here, so he's really familiar with everything. So that's the only reason for that. I would think.
I don't think we're saying that anybody has to use that particular one. We're using who's
No.
available. And if we need to get more, we can do that. And if you have names and contacts, I don't see why we would, you know, not take those from you so that we know if we are having a problem getting somebody up here.
No, I don't. I've been out of the business since 2016.
Okay.
Just
Well, I mean, you're
wanna
closer to
make
this
sure
than we
that
are, so that's why
we're
I'm
not limiting the ability of people, just like electrical and plumbing. If you're gonna touch plumbing and you're gonna touch electrical, then it has to be a licensed state or licensed
Right.
technician. And fire prevention, of course, is no different.
I understand.
And we can incorporate that. The intent is not to say you must use this contractor. We want it to be everything completely above board.
I think in concert with is a good suggestion because in the past you've had contractors or homeowners saw through the fire sprinkler system or try and change out heads, right? That's our thing we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, and this all came about because there was a contractor down in Gamble Oak who we found out had, for lack of a better phrase, jury rigged the system underneath the unit. He had which shut off fire suppression for the entire building. And we found that out a couple of days later. And we shut down the entire remodel, and that's when we called Lee and Lori to come and look at it. And then Lee and Lori said, we're not gonna touch anybody else's work. So I wrote this up. I'll admit, I wrote this up. And part of the reason for the wording is we want to make sure that we are dealing with people who we know and we trust with our buildings and the safety of the occupants. That's why it was written up that way. We can always modify the language to include other people, but we want to make sure that we know and trust the people who are working on it.
Ron.
Returning to the liability question on lofts. And I don't have a loft. I've seen many of them. And I understand that what you've written, Gary, is looking forward. And it's easier to control looking forward than the liability of what's happened in the past. Are we concerned about the liability of existing lofts and if they have been properly engineered? And whether if they have not been properly engineered, then our liability is open because we've allowed it to happen, whether it was 20 years ago. And it may have met building code 20 years ago, which you can't control. You can't force everybody to meet the current code. They're grandfathered in, but there ought to be some responsibility, I would think, of our maintenance department of the board to at least inspect all of that construction of the lofts that we're now concerned about the liability.
Yeah, I have no clue how many lofts we even have in this place, but that, I don't,
There's a lot of them.
I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I don't think there's anything wrong with us doing an inspection. Just, you know, keep in mind that we need to notify the owner. The owner's got to let us in and agree to have us do that. We may be going back to them and saying this isn't in compliance. Are we opening up a can of worms with owners then saying that they're having to go to current code?
Well,
I
It
understand
should
your
have
point,
only
though.
been required to meet code at the time, but
Right,
we're only really talking about access, stairways and railings, right? Everything else, a floor is a floor. So the inspection could be rather simple, except for the research that may be required for the 1980 building code to see in fact if unit 622 met that code or not. You can't, I don't think you could force them to meet current building codes.
But the issue is not so much meeting current building codes. Most of these that I know of met code for what was submitted. And what
They
owners and contractors submitted was, we're gonna put a loft in here and we're gonna call it storage space. It meets code for storage space. Then what happens is they turn around and put a bed up there and call it living space. Well, it met code for what they said.
Yeah, but inspecting for a bed in a storage area is also pretty easy.
Yeah, and then then all that's gonna happen is they're gonna take the bed out now and then they're gonna put the bed back. And the next owner who buys it could put a bed back. That's the problem that we have.
So we then accept that liability without question.
In that particular case, Ron, we notified Heather and Heather dropped that unit from the rental program. So if you guys would like, we can turn this all over to the attorneys, spend the money to have them draw up the exact wording we need. The intent is not to make it hard on anybody. We're just trying to make it safe for everybody.
Concerned about liability, the attorney should be involved.
well, we can certainly share it with them, right?
Yeah, we can do that.
We're gonna have cooperation of every owner that has that loft, and we're opening up a little bit of Pandora's box and going through this exercise. That's
Sure,
all-
there's
that's all I'm putting out there.
there's lofts that were put in the eighties and nineties that I'm sure were not, had no building permits associated with them. There's a bunch of them out there. Yours may qualify. Once you have a loft? I thought you had a loft in one of your units. No, okay.
Next weekend.
Okay, John, I go ahead and withdraw my motion and we'll go ahead and work with the attorneys on this one, spend the money for that. So, okay, then the next thing would be the new business. Does anybody want to take a break? Do you want to keep going?
Probably a good time to take 10 minutes.
Okay, why don't we come back at 11:25?
You might as well just say 10:30.
Okay, 10:30.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right. Really?
Through a deal or trade it.
Hey, guys.
Okay, everybody.
All right,
Before we-
the floor.
Before we get started on this, I just want to remind everyone in our governing documents and the bylaws and the code of conduct that when we recognize somebody, you should state your name and unit number. And then also when you're speaking, be respectful, be courteous, don't interrupt people, and don't be confrontational. And when you're making a comment, it should be about the topic that's currently being discussed by the board. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to new business, which are, we have two owners who have asked to present to the board. And they will each have 5 minutes to give a presentation. And we will start with Dan Noonan. Is Dan there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's coming around so he can be on camera.
Okay. I just didn't hear anything, so I kind of wondered if something was going on.
Good morning. Thank you to the board for allowing me to address you and the owners of the association. I am going to read because I want to make sure I stay on point. So please forgive me if I don't look at you. My name is Dan Noonan. I've lived in Durango since 1975. During my time spent here on the mountain living and working in fire and EMS, I witnessed Tameron's growth, challenges, and changes. In January of 2020, my wife and I decided to downsize, and we purchased a condominium in Gamble Oak, Unit 728 in August of 20, excuse me, in January of 20. We downsized after an extensive remodel and moved in full-time in August of 21 into Unit 728. For the owners who were not able to review my proposal in the letters that I sent out, I am looking for a liaison and finance committee prior to be formed. I have provided little time to share its full contents with you, so please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions after. And here's my ask to the board today and to the owners. Please listen, but not an attempt to defend and win. I ask you to listen, to be open to change. Last week, we received the Taco newsletter from the owner relations, Gary Prisby, and he stated very well what I believe to be one of the principal reasons why this committee is vitally needed. So I'll quote Gary here a little bit. How Tameron has changed over the years. When I first purchased my unit in 1999, there were only about 6 people living here full-time. Tameron was overwhelmingly a resort destination with over 250 units out of 380 in the short-term rental program. Today, we have about 78 units occupied full-time with owners and long-term renters, with the number of short-term rental units cut in half from what it was back then. All told, we have 105 people living here full-time. The evolution has presented a number of benefits as well as challenges to the Tameron community, dramatically changing the demands and expectations of our property. So thank you, Gary, you said it well. During the last 3 years, I've seen firsthand the challenges become more complicated with the lack of personnel, higher expenditures, and little increase in our revenue here at Taco. Our infrastructure continues to age, which again adds to our current and future challenges. After watching and listening and participating in our 23 budget, I feel it is once again necessary for the board to consider creating an owner liaison and finance committee. We are not a Taco association of the past. No matter how many times we say, this is how we've always done it, and these are our rules and regulations. We must accept that we have changed, we will continue to change, and how we approach solutions in the past may no longer be our answers for today or tomorrow. In my 30 years of government budgeting, I have never seen nor have ever been involved with only a 24-hour budget review and feedback process that we use here with the owners. Open, transparent, and effective budgeting should take months to develop, make public, receive feedback, consider the feedback, readjust, and then have a final budget. Again, so what's my ask? That the board consider new methods, new procedures when developing yearly budgets. That they create and engage, again, the owner liaison financial committee to assist with the budget process. What would that maybe look like? My suggestion would be at least 2 homeowners with varied experiences from each cluster, High Point, Gamble Oak, Pinecone, and the Lodge. I also feel it would be very helpful to have some full-time residents on this committee. They have an insight into observing the living daily here and the life at Tameron. Finally, I would encourage the board to recognize the same committee for their thoughts and inputs when dealing with future challenges and procedures that we have as well. As to the reasons why the board should not form such a committee, I honestly don't see any. A well-run, sought-out HOA is one that exceeds in good policies and procedures, easy access to information, strong finances. And lastly, the 3 of these vital elements cannot exist without high owner engagement. So with that, again, I appreciate you allowing me to give you this information and hopefully have you contemplate it And with luck, we will create this.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Well thought out and presented as you normally do. Since both speakers are speaking on the same topic, we'll wait until after the other speaker before we address any questions, comments. So now, Mandy, you will also have 5 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. Right, thank you so much for this opportunity to be heard. Both I and members I am representing appreciate it. My name is Mandy McGill. I'm a regenerative agriculture educator and consultant. And I am now a full-time resident in Gamble Oak and number 711. I also grew up in this area. This conversation, as Rick said, has a common theme that Dan and I both support: enhanced accountability, transparency, and owner involvement in HOA budget policy and procedures. The document that a small group of us sent out to as many owners as we could communicate with via email, entitled 2023 Tamarron HOA Budget Review, Findings and Suggestions, highlighted concerns we had regarding the proposed 2023 budget. If anything was inaccurate, it wasn't done with malice. We are simply trying to become involved and understand more about the decisions being made concerning Tamarron. So far, we have received 67 votes supporting our ideas for the future of Tamarron. A vote meaning 1 vote per unit as defined by our governing documents. By the way, if anyone tuning into this board meeting would like us to email you our document, you may reach us at mcknight2362@gmail.com. That's MCKNIGHT2362@gmail.com. Today, we are not concentrating on the 2023 budget. We are not talking numbers. Our conclusion regarding the proposed budget is that it's a result of decisions and processes that have already taken place and is therefore a done deal. What we are proposing today is a forward-looking idea. We, the owners, would like to request the formation of an owners liaison and finance committee. Many, if not most, HOAs have standing committees that serve in this role. Given we are the largest HOA in our area, why would we not have owner involvement in the form of a committee like this? The purpose of this committee would be to advise and make recommendations based on owner feedback, and the board will make the decisions. This is no different than what the standing committees of TACO already do. An owners liaison and finance committee will benefit the board with fresh perspectives based on people's lived experiences at Tamarron and also their professional expertise. It will also be beneficial to have owners who are full-time residents of Tamarron on this committee to help identify issues and address concerns that can only be known by those living here year-round. With increased owner involvement and awareness, there will be greater community-wide understanding and support when decisions are made and proposed budgets are presented for approval. This will also save the board time and energy by minimizing the need to explain and defend decisions. We feel that having such a committee will create a greater sense of inclusion, will invite broader perspectives, and ultimately provide owners with a sense of respect for their concerns and a feeling that they're a value for the common good. This is a win-win for everyone and will result in a more supportive and close-knit community. Having said this, we ask that the board approve the formation of an owners liaison and finance committee. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Rick, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, the first question I would have for this type of committee, are you guys asking just for a committee of homeowners, or are you asking for a recognized committee of the association?
I am asking for a recognized committee by the association, no different than what you do, but it should be made up of the homeowners, what you do in other aspects like the landscaping committee, etc. We're here.
So
We're here for TACO.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So that would be a committee where the chairman would report to the board president.
That's fine. I mean, just so long as we're meeting, and again, this all has to be drawn out, so long as we're meeting the needs of the community and meeting the needs of the boards, which realistically should be one and the same.
Okay, yeah, and I'm not trying to be adversarial. I'm just trying to grasp a hold of what you guys envision. Um,
I was just gonna say that it's a committee that's run just like all the other standing committees.
okay.
So if I can make a comment, and John, keeper of all documents, you can probably correct me here, but I think that requires a modification to our documents, which would require owner vote, which will take time. I could be wrong, but adding a standing committee like the art committee,
I don't,
because we have standing committees.
I'll defer to John, but I think the language in the documents might say from time to time committees could be formed and blah, 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 but not. Yeah, I don't think you would
Well,
need a
yeah.
modification to the documents to establish this committee.
And let me also preface this by saying, because Dan, you pointed it out, we've said this before. We welcome and would love to have more community involvement. And that none of this board, I think, feels otherwise. You know, I've been involved now for about 8 or 9 years, and we've had ebbs and flows of people being involved. We've had meetings where we sat here at the last budget meeting, there might have been 6, 8 people in it. So I don't think any of us are opposed to the idea of more owner involvement, more discussion around the budget. I will tell you that, and again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think we all agree that giving more time for the budget to be reviewed is reasonable. Knowing that there is a process around the budget. We can't, you know, we have to get through a certain point in the year before we have enough data to begin formulating a budget for the ensuing year. It doesn't do us any good to do a budget in June, right? That being said, every meeting we have, which is 4 per year, we do a finance report. And everybody has the opportunity to discuss anything on that finance report with every meeting that we have. Historically, we've had, again, ebbs and flows in involvement in that. But, you know, everybody is aware that we have a website, all these documents are out there, the budgets are out there. You know, we talk about the finances every quarter. And we'd love nothing more than to have more involvement. And so, John, before, you know, I guess my point in that is, I don't care if we form a committee. I just don't really want to have to go through the exercise of redrafting DCCRs, going through a 67% vote, if that's a requirement that we have to go through.
No, we don't, Scott. First of all, the bylaws state that the president of the board can appoint a committee if he or she believes that committee would be of benefit to the organization. That would be an ad hoc committee. If the committee were to be a standing committee of the association, then that does require a board action. But it does not require any changes to the documents as such.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Scott, may I reply to you?
Yeah.
You have 4 board meetings a year. That's a choice by the board. The board can have 24 if they want. They just can't have, I think, less than 4.
The bylaws require that we have four pre-scheduled board meetings per year. We've had special board meetings.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So I know when you all have a board meeting, a lot of effort goes into it. In delving down into the minutia of budget line items, I am very well aware of the pain and the agony Joe goes through to develop this budget.
Not just me.
I did it for 30 years for a fire department. My last budget was $11.5 million. At 73 personnel, we took care of 325 square miles, had 100 volunteers, 16 fire stations, and I had the community's life safety in my hands. I'm very well aware of the challenges. So the minutia of the budget is not dealt with at the board level at a board meeting. That's done at a committee level, subcommittees, going out and doing a lot of scraping and scratching and figuring out the answers. But I sense, me personally, when I sit at a budget meeting on the day before you approve the budget, I no more can comprehend all the effort you all put in to ask intelligent questions the next day without looking like a fool. And then you think it's easy questions because you know all the answers and all the background, but I don't. And again, that comes back to, yes, we're transparent, but I'm seeking understanding. And I can't get understanding in 24 hours. And I think when you have people in a community that live here and we see each other walking dogs and picking up poop, these come into conversations. Hey, I just fell on my ass yesterday on the ice up on top. You know, and you have those conversations and you try to come up with maybe what a solution is. This way you can start to create more of a community. And will we bash our heads? Yes. Will we have disagreements? Absolutely. But that's all part of living in a community, living in a family.
Don't disagree on any of your point.
Scott, could I just make a comment? I won't say everyone, but a large portion of the people sitting in the audience right now, maybe on the screen, are my neighbors and my friends, and I bumped into you picking up dog poop. So I thought about this a lot. And let me just say my concern about a board, and it's a concern, it's not an objection, to a board established committee versus something else, and I don't know what something else might be. A board established committee will have to represent broadly the mission of this board. You know, we're elected by the entire home ownership, and we have to represent the home ownership. Dan, Gary, as you well said, it's very apparent that more and more people are becoming full timers at Tamarack. But there's still an awful lot of investors. And there's still an awful lot of people that are half timers. And there's a lot of people that are a combination of maybe those two. So the board has to represent all of those interests equally. So any committee would have to be made up of not only of people that are, you know, I'd say people from each one of the 4 clusters, but you'd have to represent each one of the 4 categories of owners, full-timers, and full-timers, in my opinion, are underrepresented right now. Part-timers, maybe a combination of both, or investors. All of them will have to be involved in a board sanctioned committee. All of them, let me speak, please. All of them will have to be willing, and this is key, to put in the time that you just mentioned, Dan, in digging down into the minutia of all of the requirements, or the recommendations will come up hollow. Now, one of the differences that we have between maybe some other homeowner associations and some of the reviews that I've done is one of the big differences of Tamarack versus probably the large majority of homeowners associations in the world or in the United States are, we have full-time 24/7, maybe 20, we have full-time management. A lot of the other homeowners, condo associations, and many, maybe most of them, are represented by HOA companies.
Yeah, they're outsourced.
It's a big difference. It's a huge difference. So what we've got is we've got 3 people, maybe more at times, who every day the invoices come in, they study the invoices, they pay the invoices, they go back and forth. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And the board has to yield a tremendous amount of deference to their opinions because they do it every single day. So now we fast forward to a committee. If the board committee is sanctioned, it'll have to represent all the interests that I just said. But in addition, all of the folks that represent those interests will have to be willing to put in the time to have an understanding that is as deep as the understanding as the people that deal with it every day. And if that can happen, bang, I think that the board can sanction a HOA type of a recognized committee. My reservation, and this is just me, is I've dealt with the budget several times now, prior to being on the board, after being on the board. I haven't seen the willingness of people to want to step up and put in hours and hours and hours of work to get this level of understanding, to make a recommendation to the board, which the board could sanction as representative of all of the people the board has to represent. So that is a concern. I'm not saying it's an objection, but it is something that the board, to sanction a committee, would have to be very confident that that level of commitment is there.
On an ongoing basis.
on an ongoing basis. And it can't happen the first meeting and then everybody gets tired. It has to happen and that is key.
I think you made a very good point. You're right. I mean, I've been doing this now 7, 8, 9 years. You know, we go through this 4 times a year. We kind of know the ins and outs of the budget because we've talked about it, 70 times. It's, there's nothing wrong with the education side to this. I think, to Mark's point, and to my point a little earlier, we welcome the involvement. But you're going to have to, I think, and I'll let Rick chime in or any of the board members. I think we need a more formal, what do you recommend on how we structure this? How do we do it? I don't think there's any opposition to the idea of having more engagement and involvement in the budget discussions. As I said earlier, I don't think there's any issue or concern around giving you guys, ownership, I should say, more time to review. It has to be within reason, obviously. Keep in mind, all we do is certify the budget that we went through at the budget meeting. And then there is a process, to reject that budget. Is it a realistic it's a difficult process. And, there's a lot of education would have to go in to do that too. So if we can mitigate that concern by involving a group of owners, and those owners are actively involved, I think that's meaningful for all of us.
Well, to answer your question and Mark's, again, in order to have owner involvement, Mark, you say, are the people willing? Well, one, do we actually go out and ask people to be involved? Do we say, you know what? Mike Stengel. Anybody know what Mike did for 40 years? That's the problem. And we have so many people like that. Mike was in the asphalt business here in Durango for 40 years. He bid out projects all the time. You have any question about asphalt, any questions about coating asphalt, when to coat it, how to coat it, you tap into a guy like that. So, and this association is full of people who have quality information and experiences in their lifetimes that can aid us.
Totally.
Do I know who they all are? Do you know who they all are? Absolutely not. But when we have projects like, so, and again, I'll go up on a slight tangent. Last year, I saw people shoveling the roofs. This year, I see people shoveling the roofs. I hear the costs that we're spending in snow removal. And I'm going, all right, sounds like a roof problem. But it sounds like we've known there's been a roof problem since 2015, Gary, I think you said in the latest email, that we took a bid for $500,000.
That was part of long-term asset replacement. We
Okay,
went through the
but
process.
granted, but how many years have we been shoveling roofs? And we got to figure out a solution. So who did roofs in this whole
The need
organization?
for shoveling roofs is not, it may be somewhat tied to the age of the roof. You can have a brand new roof and you can't let ice dams built up and build icicles that
Right, but
cover
there's
up in
ways
front
to
of you.
mitigate
You're
that.
still gonna be shoveling roofs. Or you're gonna be putting in a roof with heat strips that helps to mitigate that.
Right,
I
which
mean,
is what your vendor
contemplating.
explained that he would do on this lodge roof.
Yeah.
My point is every way, like Joe, like you say, you try to find places to cut corners. So do you have people like that? Do we utilize them? When you say we have to be educated as a committee, we do, but that's part of being a committee. But the committee also has to know that I can go to Gary and ask him questions and there's a relationship. I can go to Alyssa and ask her questions. I can call one of the board members and ask a question. These are all of the people on the committee. So we can be educated and there's an open line of communication. But all that's most of that, as again, us who worked on budgets know, a lot of that's done in the background. When you work on policies and procedures, as Ron's speaking to in the details thereof, a lot of those questions aren't going to be solved here. They're going to be solved with somebody doing homework elsewhere. And do you have people? I don't know. You don't have people that serve on boards forever. You constantly change. And the committee would be the same way. Why I thought too, well, if it's Mandy and me and Gamble Oak, and I'm going to be gone and I can't attend, then she can attend. And there's some continuity. And eventually I'm going to say, hey, I can't do it anymore. I got to find somebody else.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your hesitancy and your concerns, but I think they are easily, not easily, I mean, they're all have solutions.
Well, again, I said it was a concern. I didn't say it was an objection.
Right.
But, but remember, two things, two parameters. One is, broad, which represents the broad interests. And each element of the broad interest has to be willing to put in the time. And again, it's a concern. And you know, could there, and Dan, I personally, I liked your attachment better than the email, because I think the attachment gives us more flexibility to solve the problem. Maybe the committee, and again, from listening to what you just said, maybe what we're talking about here is more of a communications committee than we are a budget committee. Where we do understand that Mike is a professional, well, was a professional guy that did surfacing type work. Folks, will the first roofing expert please raise our hand? Because we do have roofing.
But you do bring him up. I mean, the reason why Paul's on the ECW was recommended for that committee is because of his expertise.
Right.
We didn't know he had it. Now we do.
You find out these things by accident. pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, so believe me, we don't get resumes and backgrounds when people buy a house. So somebody got to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm really good at this. Can I help? Right?
And we have to say we need help in this area.
Yeah.
But you know,
I've been involved in this HOA for 20 years now. Yeah, 21. And my experience has been that owners at large willingness to participate, like Mark says, by putting in the hours, putting in the work. Less rather than more.
let me give one.
There's more, and I know the reason why there's so many people here at this meeting. It's because we had a budget that got everybody's attention this year, and everybody wanted to talk about it, and you formed an owners group online, and there was a lot of communication. You never see this many people at this meeting in January.
It's actually refreshing.
It is, it's very refreshing.
If we had this many
And if
people
this
at
is
the
an
meeting-
indication of what we could expect going forward, and with this committee being formed, I support it. I'd rather see more owner involvement than less.
And Joe, let me just say one thing that's formed my opinion. And that is, you know, that I've chaired the landscaping committee for the past year or so. We met to develop a reasoned ask to the budget for 4 lines in the budget. We had 9 meetings. We listened to, I don't know how many experts, probably irritated staff with a few questions. Spent an awful lot of time for 4 lines. We were granted 60% of what we asked for. Our budget has about 75 lines. And it'll require as deep a dive into each one of those lines, if anything meaningful is going to come to the board, where the board can be comfortable that we're representing the opinion of all the homeowners. And I'll finish with that.
I think Kim has been up and down multiple times. So Kim,
I would just point out concern that you're speaking of. I think it's important to note that we did come up with 67 votes from owners that are indeed very interested in supporting this formation of the committee. And I think that needs to be put out on the table.
Can I ask you, was the question, do you support a committee? Or was the question, are you willing to serve or chair the committee?
No, we wouldn't ask that because we're not at that stage. And
Yeah,
the
but that's the
gonna
big
be the more
concern.
that question's gonna have the more salient answer.
Sure, but we can't move to that until you, if indeed you do decide to form this.
I think Ron had his end up first.
Yeah, I'd just like to commend the proposal that the board is not representative of each housing group
Yes.
on a pro rata basis, because we can't expect that to happen. The basis of this committee is to make sure that we have balanced input from the entire community. And I would guess, Mark, that they would be just as happy to also add to that the full-timers, the part-timers, the investors also be part of this group and represented at least at the committee level. And I think that's an easy change for them to.
They would have to be.
I think that's what Mark said.
They would have to be, but I would add one point is, but all of the communities, all of the groups cast a vote. And that's what the board has to represent in terms of when we make a decision. are we balancing? And it's a balancing act. My short 6 months on this board, it's a balancing act because while I come up as a half timer, Dan is a full timer, Mandy, you're a full timer, and the interests are different. But we have to balance the interests of the investor types. They don't want to spend any time at all. They want to just go ahead and get value for their investment, and we have to balance all of that.
I think Gary had a comment first, then we'll come to you, Manny.
I'm gonna offer what is sort of a trivial example, but it's exactly like this. Those of you who have been here for a while might remember about 6 or 7 years ago, I sent out an email. A couple of people had approached me and said, hey, can we form a golfing club? Can we form a hiking club? Can we form this kind of club? And I said, yeah, okay, fine. So I sent out an email and I said, who would be interested in forming what type of club? And I got emails back from a whole bunch of people, and we came up with hiking, golfing, a book club, tennis. There were 12 different clubs that people had suggested that we form. Not one person said that they would organize it. Not one. So that's the one concern that I think people are expressing here is if we form this, and I'm in favor of it, if we form it though, people have to commit to it.
Yeah, we don't want to form something that's doomed to fail.
Okay, let me jump in here real quick.
Hold on, Rick, one more with Mandy. Mandy wants to make a comment.
Okay,
Yeah, just a couple things. One, we never said it needs to be all full-time residents, not at all. We want full representation of all the different living areas and then all levels of ownership too. And then what was my other statement? I can't remember. But anyway.
I think we're saying the same thing.
You're too young for that to start happening.
And just for the record, I know this probably goes without saying, but you are kind of preaching to the choir here, because we've been volunteering for a long time, and putting our hours in and getting away from our families and taking away from our jobs. We welcome the help. So I don't want you to think that in any way, shape, or form, we're not supportive of the idea. I think what we're trying to point out is, if you want to do it, at least let's do it seriously, right?
Yeah, I
Don't
think that's
half-ass
the
it.
thing is it something that people are interested in? And if so, we do the next step of, okay, who wants to commit to this?
Can I make a recommendation? And people that are online, and maybe Gary, you want to even send out a cue. But send Gary emails and put things in writing what you propose. We can or management can collate the requests, break them out into, and so in the next meeting, we have in writing, and in that request saying, I'm willing to put in how many hours? Many hours to come up to speed on all of these 75 budget line items. And you don't have to say what you represent, because we know if you're a full timer, where you live. We know that. Let's see if in fact there's a broad volunteer that comes into Gary, or if it's like he's experienced in the past and no one, if you want to say to Gary, good idea, but I have no interest in serving, say that. So at least we know that what we're dealing with. The concepts are very, very good. We just want to make sure we don't set up something that's just destined to fail.
Yeah, and I'm curious what does happen when you form an official committee and you have these parameters. What happens if you can't get anybody from High Point? Well, then you're all off balance and you're not filling your committee according to the definition of a committee. And how long would somebody be committing? The board is a 3-year commitment. What is the commitment on the committee? So there are lots of unknowns. I think we're all really happy to see so many people here and so many people wanting to be involved. That's what builds great communities. We just need to proceed with great thought about really what is the ask and what is the ability to meet that.
I think we should yield back to Rick and let him make his comment.
what I was wanting to say is basically what everybody's saying. you guys have presented some good ideas. It's something we've been asking for, which is additional input from owners. Are we ready to make a decision right now? I don't think so. Are you guys ready to put people in place right now? I don't think so. I think we need to have time to digest and to spend a little more time getting prepared to, if we want to move forward on this, be ready to go. As everyone has said, we welcome the input. You know, we would prefer people, ownership as a whole, tell us this is what we would like. I mean, that takes some of the guesswork for decisions away from us. So I just think what we need to do is go ahead and say, okay, no later than the May meeting, we'll go ahead and we'll see where we're at. You know, maybe before then we have a special meeting. I don't know, but let's put some more effort and thought into it to exactly how we want to structure this, who's going to be a part, are people going to be committed to it? Because we don't want to start something up and then just have it fall by the wayside. I think the proper way to move forward would be as an ad hoc committee where we see how this works out. Then if it works out like you guys are telling us it would, you know, then we're happy to have it. And then at that point, we could look to making a standing committee.
Let me just add to that. When we say ad hoc committee, I think what we're saying here is, guys, if this is something you're serious about, let's put some structure around it. Let's get some volunteers, share that with us. Again, I don't think anybody's opposed to this in any way, shape, or form. We just need to understand exactly what the ask is. What's, you know, how much involvement are we going to have with the staff? How much involvement is BHP going to have involved? What's the time commitment across the board? Are you suggesting a monthly meeting? Are you suggesting a quarterly meeting? We have a board meeting, obviously, in May. We can ratify the committee. We could have a special board meeting to ratify the committee. But, you know, again, I think what we need, not to put words in your mouth, but I think what we're looking for is just give us some more structure around it and let's figure it out. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that it's not a bad idea in any way, shape, or form, but we do need to understand it. One thing we don't want to do, and I hate to be master of the obvious, but we're talking about this because people are concerned about expenses. Right? Well, if I need to start having a bunch of people come in that we're paying to sit in meetings, those are expenses. So let's talk about the structure and figure out what makes sense. And, you know, I think we're open to it. So I know you wanted to say something, Dan.
Mr. Chair, when you say ad hoc, my only concern about using the word ad hoc is it seems you're adding a level that doesn't need to seem to be there. And I'll ask Joe to validate this, or John. You have the ability to create and dissolve committees at your your pleasure. So ad hoc is like you can create us, you can dissolve us. I don't know what ad hoc means.
Whatever terminology. I mean, I don't want to get hung up on that. Yeah, we can just say temporary committee. What I sense here is you guys are asking for this. We're saying, okay, let's move forward. You know, we're to the point of you're asking, can we do this? And we're saying, okay, we're giving you what you're asking for in that, okay, let's explore this and let's move forward.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And that's why you didn't see me do all that other work, is I wanted to hear what I've heard today, which is there's a level of interest. And I didn't ask today that it be approved in my presentation. You have an additional ask right now, and that is, I was able to communicate to the board level very detailedly. But as you know, you did not support me sending my letter out with the agenda, so the whole ownership knows what's going on. And as I understand, I don't think Mandy's group was able to get their letter out to the whole ownership. If we're gonna be on a level playing field, I need to get that information out to the whole ownership. And since we are here today now, and the thought concept has been approved, can we get those documents to the whole ownership? And then we will start crafting how to put this together, who's on it, when we're gonna meet, when we're not gonna meet. Again, we have no official power. We know that as a subcommittee. We only, excuse me, we only are going to be making recommendations. And we'll have to start crafting where we're gonna start and, you know, and just be looking to you all as well. If you have another issue come up that has to do with a large procedural change or policy change, hopefully it will be thrown to us for a dog bone to say, hey, you guys want to chew on this?
So if I can just make a quick comment there. It wasn't that what and I told you this when we went back and forth in emails. We wanted to hear this today. Okay, it wasn't like we didn't want to send a communication out to owners. We didn't want to give individual owners the ability to just blast whatever they wanted, because that sets precedent. We've had more asks than we can even provide a count on of people wanting to send up, you know, ask for donations for this charity or that charity, or, you know, just a bunch. So what, you know, I think what we're saying here is we're more than happy to communicate it to ownership. I think the vehicle for that is Gary, because he has access to that and he does it all the time. Put structure around it and make some suggestions and then we can ask them, you know, who wants to volunteer? What's your background? What's your credibility is a bad word. You know, what's your, you know, your background, what you bring to the table, what's your experience?
How much time are you willing to
How
give?
much time are you willing to give? Make it representative of the various, you know, tranches that we talked about, right? I mean, we do want to have, you know, people here that here permanently. We want to have people that, you know, are here using this as an investment property and using it as a vacation property. We need to have all those interests represented on the committee. And, you know, again, I think we're saying the same thing. We're open to it.
That might even be good to put on there too, is to determine what kind of owner they are. Are you an investor, or do you do short-term rentals? Are you a full-time resident? You know, just gather that information.
And
I was just gonna say, since most HOAs have standing committees like this with budget and finance and things, there's a lot of guidelines out there we can tap into to figure out, you know, what works for us. And also I would just say, if we want this to be a serious commitment from the community, then I think it should be a standing committee, because otherwise if it's ad hoc, it's kind of like, well, we're not that serious about it, so commitment might not be that serious.
I don't, again,
could skip
forget
that.
the word ad hoc. You know, what we're saying is right now it's ad hoc. You guys give us some structure.
Yeah.
Let us know what it looks like.
So
Then we can make it a standing committee. And again, none of us are opposed to the concept.
we'll start working on that. We'll
Yeah.
work with Gary. Can I just have clarification? Can the information we've already crafted explain to people where the idea comes from and why we want to go down this road? Can that be sent to the full membership along with the minutes of the meeting?
I think what we can do is summarize the ask. But I'd like to use, and again, this is me speaking, so everybody chime in. I'd like to use that also as a vehicle to ask for volunteers. I don't want to
Well,
just.
no, we're going to,
Yeah.
but again, I guess my point is I'm trying to understand what the fear here is. I did this once before. All right, I did this in January of 22, and I had a full 3-page letter of why I thought this would be have validity, and that was never sent to the membership. There was a 2 or 4 sentence summary. I'm trying to educate, she's trying to educate, her group's trying to educate. I'm trying to understand why there seems to be a challenge in sending that vehicle to the full membership. We've been approved to talk, we have talked. People, I would think, would want to understand where we're coming from. That's what those 2 letters are.
I think we just said that we're more than willing to make a communication, go through the you know, the normal channels that we do with Gary, summarize the ask of both of you all or of the group, and ask for volunteers, put it all in place.
Okay.
I mean, we're not disagreeing with you.
No, I'm not talking the same language. I'm not hearing what you're trying to share.
Are you wanting
That's
to
fine.
send out your original communication and then do a follow-up communication
Correct.
to determine ownership level?
It's gonna take us some
and-
time to develop what you're asking for, what we're gonna ask for, which is, all right, how are we gonna break this up? When we're gonna meet? It's kind of like the policies and procedures of our committee.
So your idea is send out your initial communication to say, heads up, you'll be hearing more on this. With more definition and please consider being involved,
Well,
something like.
it's what Gary's gonna do normally. He's gonna say, Dan Noonan spoke, this is what the issue was, his letter's attached. Further communication will be coming forward. The board wants to see this group move forward with a committee, liaison finance committee. You'll be hearing from them in the future. This is what was discussed.
Yeah, what I was envisioning is us just taking what you had suggested, rewording it, adding the other pieces to it to look for volunteers, coming up with, and we'll share the draft. Let's just come up and create the draft that we want to go out. And ask for people to.
So one overall communication rather than this coming in bits and pieces.
I don't,
just one.
I have no problem saying that you're the one that brought it up. I have no problem saying a group of owners brought it up. I don't think we're trying to diminish what you're trying to do.
I'm not looking for ownership and you as a board are gonna have to agree on structure. You as a board are gonna have to agree how we're gonna operate. So to me, in my mind, the letters we have created that you all have seen get sent to the membership along with the minutes. This is what was discussed. The board has authorized this group to move forward and establish structure, policies, procedures, etc. They will come to the next board meeting, whether it be special or regular, and have that approved. So when you say, hey, Dan, hey, Mandy, this looks good. Let's now see if you can fill it. In the meantime, they get to marinate on this meeting. As Rick said, people get to contemplate, they get to read the documents, have a better understanding of where we're coming from. And then you approve the structure and the policy and procedures, and then we can say, go for it, see if you can find those people that are willing to commit.
I think we're saying the same thing. We're open to doing just that.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for being open. That's awesome. Feels good to have more flow of communication and just the openness to it. So thank you.
Yeah, like I said before, I think we need to, go from here and you guys can put some stuff together. We'll see what we feel we need from the group and then we'll get back together. So.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mary.
Yeah, Mary Keys, Unit 744. My question is, how are the other standing committees formed? Do they represent broadly all the owners of Tamron?
Not necessarily because they're volunteers.
Would you like me to, Rick, would you like me to respond?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, there are two types of committees, and I hope people don't get hung up on the word ad hoc. Ad hoc just means that Rick can appoint it. The president can appoint a committee according to the documents. The president can appoint a committee if he or she feels that that's going to be beneficial. When it becomes a standing committee, then the board has to take an action to make that happen. What we have typically done in the past is when there's been an interest in a committee, we have had the president create it, and assuming it works to everyone's satisfaction, it then becomes a standing committee. So that has worked in the past and probably could work again. Regarding as far as the composition of committees, there's nothing in the documents that specifies that there should be so many from this location or so many from that location or so many that represent a certain type of ownership and another type of ownership. So in that regard, Scott's question comes forward in that if we were to put in restrictive language in creating such a committee, that would be something that probably would have to, I don't know, but that could represent a change to the documents. I don't know that, but typically I think what would happen here, whether it's the president appointing it or whether it's the board appointing it, the board, the language is permissive, so to speak. That is to say, either the president or the board could establish a committee and could then manage the membership of that committee to achieve certain ends. And if it's felt by the board that such a committee would be better if it were comprised of people that lived in a certain place or had a certain type of interest in owning here, the board can certainly do that in seeking members and then approving them as members of the committee.
I got a comment, and it goes to Mary's question. I'm sure you guys have some idea of how many people on this committee you would like. Maybe you don't, but you'll think about that. But if you endeavored to have a committee member from every complex, a committee member from every ownership type, be that full-time, part-time, renters, so I think you would have a committee that was too large, too cumbersome, too hard to have meetings with. I don't know what the optimal number of committee members is for any kind of a committee. My brain tells me probably 4 to 7 max. So I would just throw that out to you. If you tried to cover every type of owner on this property, it might be impossible or end up in a committee that was too large.
No, but you could even get people that represent 2 or 3 types of at once. Yeah, Mary, I just want to make one point with what you said. So, you know, being unique that I've chaired the landscape committee, our role is very narrow, and I've reached out, and as Brent knows, I've reached out, and when someone from Pinecone stepped off the committee, I reached out to bring someone up from Pinecone back on. So we have someone there from each cluster, but it's very narrow. The budget is not narrow at all. So, you know, it's just a whole different scope. So while the board may not have a very detailed requirement for the types of people that would be on a landscape committee, with a budget committee, it's very different because it affects every aspect of everything that happens with people at every level at this community. So it would have to be very well thought out.
Okay. Well, what I was going to ask, is there anybody else that has any other new information that will advance this discussion?
Yeah. As long as the board says it's okay to do this, if you guys want to write something up, write up a mission statement, write up what it is you're looking to do, who it is you're looking for. We have a page on the website of committees. I can put all of that stuff on that page with a notice on the news and events page, a temporary notice that says, you know, a group of homeowners are looking to do this, please click here and you'll see what they want to do. We can put it all on the website, and then you will get, hopefully, people who are really interested in doing it. And I think that would satisfy one of the concerns that about sending out your letter, and that was giving out the email address of owners who don't want that given out.
You can send it out. Well, I'm not asking for email addresses. You can send it out.
Yeah.
I understand.
That's what I meant by structure. I mean, let's wrap a bow around this, right? Let's wrap a bow around it. We'll look at your letter, you know, we'll figure out exactly what we need to communicate. We'll, you know, if you want to get people to volunteer, we'll figure all of that out. So, you know, I think we're kind of all in agreement. Do you want to make one more comment, Mandy?
One quick thing. Yeah, I think the goal is obviously to have broad representation, but at this point, any excitement from, you know, having that any level of involvement would be better than where we're at right now. So
I think what you're going to find out is you're going to get people who want to participate,
it might happen.
and you're going to say to yourself, I don't really care where they're from, or I don't care whether they're a part-time or a full-time owner. They want to participate. They'll put in the time.
Right.
That's who you're looking for.
And that's what we need. So it's like whatever we can get, I think is the goal, and if we can have broad representation, that's a plus, but every other standing, or every other committee is kind of the same thing, like I think landscape, we don't have.
Yeah, and then once you figure out who those people are, then you can, the board, can, figure out what the mission statement's gonna be, who it's representing, what level of advice.
And some diamonds will come out of those volunteers.
Yeah.
You'll have a whole bunch of them that say, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and then 3 months later, they're out here.
We might find future board members there. I mean, this is the way it happens,
And whenever I realize how much fun budget stuff is, they're gonna be all over it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, my advice would be
What you asked for.
you may want to be careful what you ask for here because, I won't say 9.3 or 8.3. I'll say $187,000 may be a wishful amount.
Hey, I think, Scott Dunn, were you trying to chime in something a minute ago?
Yes, sir, several times, but I'm trying to be respectful.
Sorry about
My question, if you don't mind me asking, is when is this presented to the board, the HOA board? Y'all had to get it before today or before it was sent out. Having been on the city council and stuff like that, the city manager presents why they are coming up with the numbers they are in each section of the budget. It may take, several meetings to come up with all of that. To me, it's just a volunteer, because I'm not interested in when the employees are, going to be budgeted. I'm interested in when a building's going to be, renovated or something like that. So it's just done when, so when it's, when it's being presented to the board, just have open meetings that the residents can listen in on, not make comments, but maybe come back after the meeting and make the comments.
So is your question, what was this idea presented to the board? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm first of all, I'm asking, when is the budget presented to the board? Hopefully this is not the first time y'all were seeing it, and it was presented in a timely fashion that y'all had plenty time to digest it and give thumbs up to move it on to the membership. If not, then then I'd be more in favor of, hey, we need something else done about here. But definitely, I look at y'all to be the voice of the residents.
So to summarize the process, just so you kind of understand it, as I mentioned earlier, we have 4 board meetings a year. We do a financial report on at every board meeting, starting in roughly August-ish. Alyssa, Joe, others sit down. September, start preparing for the budget meeting, which is typically the end of October or early November. And they begin, trying to come up with numbers for the budget for the following year. And then we discuss it in a workshop that happens, as I said, in end of October, early November. And then we have a board meeting the following day to discuss it. And basically, we don't ratify, we adopt it at that point, and then it goes out to the ownership for review, comment, and they have a right to dispute per the documents if they choose to do so. Again, what I think we're suggesting here is more visibility along the way. Having
my comment is on y'all's workshop when this is presented to you. Why not have that opened up to the residents so they can see where the numbers are coming?
It is.
Okay.
That's in the Bible.
And to further to Scott's point, every committee meeting that we have is open. Most of them have been open, like the landscape committee. Every single one of those was on Zoom and anybody could have joined.
Well, I heard 2 comments. Two comments over here. Ron and Dan both raised their hands and said the workshop is listen only. It is. But the very next day is an open board meeting and owner comment is solicited at that meeting, which is.
Right, but again, Joe, so I have less
I
than
know.
20 hours. to
I get it.
digest
we've already agreed we want to solve for that.
I'm just answering Scott's question.
The whole reason I'm agreeing with this is the timing aspect.
Right.
And we'd like to open that up. Probably not as much as you'd like to, but it'll get opened up. If I get.
Hopefully
to
the
say so.
committee will do a lot of the work that will open it up, so you don't have to deal with that.
we'll see how that goes.
If you guys got a better solution,
No, that's what we're working towards, right?
Yeah.
We don't know the perfect answer today. We won't know perfect answer in March. We won't know it in May. It's gonna be an iterative process over time.
And now Scott was asking process, and we all agree that there's got to be some changes in opening up the process. And I don't know if Scott was addressing whether, you know, the actual committee. But the process was what the process was, and we all agree that it needs to be opened up. That's why I'd like it, but I don't know what that looks like at this point, but it definitely has to be opened up. That's been made loud and clear.
neither do I.
And that's what we'll work through.
You want the chat questions?
Are there, I saw a ton of them there. Some of them were just comments. Are there any there that are posing specific questions?
Can we have a show of hands to any ready to commit to volunteering?
I think that's,
Yeah.
I mean,
Do we have somebody to be the chairperson?
there,
Right.
that's what I wanted to
It's
say.
better have been you.
Between the two of you, that's it better been one of you.
One question, why do all the various owner groups have to be represented on the committee when this is comprised of volunteers? The committee is only formed to make recommendations and provide feedback. The board has the ultimate decision-making power.
We've spoken to that.
Okay.
Most of the stuff I've seen flash up have all been comments. I haven't seen much as far as questions. I think we've pretty much at this point agreed to agree and agreed that we need to move forward to see how we can better facilitate everything to make it easier and more acceptable to everyone. So unless anybody has anything else, then I will make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second, I'll second that. One shot.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, this meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.